Hello, everybody. Thank you again for stopping in and just checking out what we've got going this week. This is um, we talked about the crucifixion the past 2 weeks. Now we're going to jump into a new section where we're going to talk about relationships and just how we can have good, solid relationships. Just six different topics that are built around those things. So uh, we're going to look at John chapter 15, verses 9 through 14. And one of the what this lesson is really going to consist of is how we can build relationships that show genuine love, just like the love that God showed us. So um, let's get to digging in. But the preceding verses to this, the beginning of John chapter 15, is Jesus talking about being the vine, and the disciples themselves were the branches. All right. So if we think about that analogy, we've got a vine. All right. So we've got a plant, and the main part of that plant that's growing up is going to be Jesus. All right. And then what comes off of that branch, off of that vine, is going to be the branches. That's where the fruit's going to be produced. That's where the leaves are. All of those different things. So Jesus is saying, look, I'm the vine. I'm the main support of this plant. I'm the life of this plant. And then you're going to be what spreads out. You're going to be what does a lot of the work. But you can't do anything as a branch if you're not connected to a vine. So Jesus is telling them, hey, look, I'm going to be the centerpiece of this life. All right, and that's exactly how we should view this. Is Jesus should be the centerpiece of our life. But let's dig into exactly what Jesus was talking about here. Starting in verse 9, we'll do 9 and 10, and then the next section will be 11 and 12, and then we'll finish up through 14 with our last section. But verse 9 through 10 says this: As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. All right? So, if we look back to Matthew, in Matthew chapter 22, Jesus has this experience with the Pharisees, and the Pharisees are really trying to put Jesus to the test, and they're trying to catch him up, because Jesus is really kind of turning things on upside down for them, because Jesus is the Messiah come, and here the Pharisees are kind of like, wait a minute, this guy what's going on? So let's lay a little trap for him. Let's put him to the test to see if we can catch him up. And they say, all right, Jesus, if you know God so well, then if God is your Father, then exactly what's the most important commandment? So Jesus, cool as a cucumber, he responds. He says, look, number one, love God. All right? Love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with everything you got. Basically, love God with everything you got. That's number one. Number two is love your neighbor as yourself. All right? Don't just like your neighbor, but treat your neighbor as you would treat yourself. Now, most of us aren't going to go out and intentionally do harmful things, because we love ourselves, we care for ourselves, and that's what the love we should show to the people around us. So first of all, love God with everything you got. Give every bit of your being, and give that into loving God. And then two, love your neighbors yourself. Everything that we do should be driven by the genuine love for God and for others. Now, that oftentimes seems impossible. I know myself, I'm probably hard to love at times too, with all the different relationships that I have with my wife, with my parents, with my kids. It's probably difficult to love me with genuine love all the time. I understand that. And it's hard for me to love people around me in genuine love as well. So how can we do this? What can we do? Well, that's just perfect, because Jesus has given us the answer right here. We're not responsible for that type of love. We can't produce that ourselves. Okay? Now, what do I mean? Well, God is love. Okay? Love is found in God. To continually give love to others, well, we've got to receive love from the Father first. If we haven't received any love from the Father, if we haven't received any love from God, then we can't give love out. We can't give away something that we don't have, that we haven't received first. So we have to be based in our relationship with God. We can look at the quality of our relationship with others, and we can probably tie it directly to our relationship to God as well. One of the key terms that we see multiple times in these couple of verses is the word remain, all right? Remain, it means to stay, okay? And not just stay, it's more of a sense of dwelling and living there. If you are dwelling somewhere, then that's your home. You feel at home. We should dwell in God's love. That's what he's meaning here. He says, hey, look, remain in God. Remain in that love. Stay there. Make yourself at home and love it. Now, how do we do that? You know, Jesus, that's a great idea, but how exactly can I remain in God's love? Well, first of all, the first thing we need to do is we got to spend time. Okay. Well, what do you mean by time? Prayer, talking to God, and then studying the Bible. That's God talking to us. So, spending time in prayer, spending time in the Word, really communicating, because let's face it, all relationships require communication. And then the second thing that we've got to do is we've got to be obedient. We have to be ready to hear God. We have to know the truth. We have to share the truth. But it's not just a basic understanding of the truth. No, we have to live those truths out on a daily basis. All right? So spending time in the Word, spending time in prayer, communicating, and then also obeying, which means that we are living this life out in front of others. To bear fruit, we must obey. We have to be obedient to the Word. Obeying the Lord, that brings a sense of affection from the Lord down to us. And then when we are in that affection, that's going to lead us into a deeper understanding of the love that Jesus had for us. And then through that, we're going to be able to take that love and we're going to bring life to others through that. So as we reflect back on this, number one, what do we tend to expect from people who love us? What do we expect from our parents? What do we expect from our siblings? And then how would you describe the connection between remaining in God's love and obeying His commands? What's the connection between dwelling there in God's love, but then also obeying the commands? As we jump into section 2, when we talk about a celebration, when we're excited about something, we've got a smile on our face, we're joyful, we're really excited, and that's what a worship should look like. When we're coming to worship God, we should be in a situation where, man, you can't hide it. It's just this sense of joy. It's overwhelming that not only I can feel and I can experience, but people around me can see the joy that I have. That's the celebration that we should be showing in a worship celebration. You know, you think about somebody who's that person at a party that they just well, whatever. You know, they're not very fun to be around at the party. So we need to celebrate. So let's look at the verses here. Verses 11 and 12 say this: I've told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. All right, so living a life that's based in Christ, if He's the vine and we're going to be the branches, if we're living that life, it's going to produce joy. You know, we're going to be a nice person to be around. We're not going to be a stick in the mud. We're going to be excited because we have this joy, we have this love, we have this just glow that Jesus living in us is putting out to the people around us. This is not a grinded out lifestyle where, I got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. No, this is a lifestyle that is a path to freedom. All right, as we begin to experience the joy of Christ, then we're going to start to be set free from a lot of different things. Whereas if we're not experiencing the love of Christ, if we're departing from this, then that's going to be a road of misery where we're just always just kind of upset and negative. Now, um, God, when we're listening and God calls us to things, God's going to call us to things for our own good. Um, so when we know the love of God, things that things don't seem like a requirement to do. Instead, they're done with joyful optimism. So, knowing the love of God, there may be somebody that you have a relationship with that they're just it's a tough spot. Um, but when we're in God's love, then we realize that, hey, reaching out to that person, that's not something that's just I've got to do this. No, that's something that, hey, I want to reach out to them because I want to show that person the love that God has shown me, and that's what Jesus is telling us here. He's telling us, hey, look, love each other as I've loved you. Now, how can we express this joy? How can we express the joy that of love, that feeling of love that Jesus gives us? Well, number one, we can express this in our lives through our worship. Church is a celebration. All right. We all carry burdens. We all have problems. We all have issues, and some we are to take them to church because we're to give those things over to God. But we should be celebrating. We should be excited. Just thinking about the idea of, hey, I've got all these troubles. I've got all these worries, but man, I get to spend eternity in the presence of the Lord. Man, that's something that we should celebrate. So there's going to be times where you're at church and you're just, I don't know. But, you should still be in celebration because, man, somebody's paid a price for you that you can't even imagine. The next way that we can express this joy in our lives is at school or work. We carry out our responsibilities, whatever it is our task is to do. We carry those out, or we relate to others, especially people in authorities, our bosses, teachers, principals, whatever. If we will just reach out to them or do those things in a manner that expresses the joy of Jesus Christ, then even though that may be a hard relationship to deal with, if we're expressing the joy of Christ, it's going to ease that relationship down the road, and then eventually that relationship will become very, very good because you've got the joy of Christ. If you're giving it out, all right, that person is more than likely going to be receptive. Remember, the only way that we give it out is if we're in a good relationship with God. And then the last way that we express this joy is through our relationships, all right? Again, nobody likes a Debbie Downer, okay? Sorry, Debbie's out there. That's just what you get. Just a nice saying. A lot of Debbies I know are very pleasant people. But we live out that joy that's in our heart so that others around us can't help but be excited, all right? If we're living that joy out, if, that person that's always smiling, that's always got a positive attitude, it's hard to be negative around them, and that's that love of Christ. So the three ways that we can express our love or the joy in our lives is through our worship, through our work or school, but also through our relationships. So verse 12 here, Jesus tells us, he says, look, love each other as I've loved you. Now, he's basically saying, look, don't hoard this love. Don't keep it for yourself. Well, in all actuality, we can't keep it to ourselves. We've got to let the love flow. We've got to let the love out. So as that love comes into us, we in turn, we let it out. We share it with others. That's exactly what the Word tells us to do, is to take the love that we've got and in turn share it with others so that they can experience it themselves. Now, looking at that, love one another as I've loved you, I want you to think about this. Jesus willingly submitted to the Father to go and hang on a cross and die for you and me when we weren't worthy of that. We're still not worthy of that. That's love. That's a type of love that we can't even begin to imagine. So, how exactly does Jesus love us? Well, he's generous. We see that through all of the sick people he healed throughout his ministry here on earth. He's forgiving that exact situation of being on the cross. He's there hanging, he's dying, and what does he do? He actually asks God the Father to forgive those people who are hanging him on the cross because they don't know what they're doing. All right, so that's forgiving. Graciously, as Jesus is traveling, he comes across this woman at a well, and he graciously tells her exactly how she could experience thirsting no more. Kindly, in that same experience, Jesus was kind, because we see this because he's traveling through Samaria, a place that most Jews would have went around, so they didn't have to be around Samaritans. But yet Jesus goes that way just specifically so that he can in turn show the graciousness to the woman at the well. Mercifully, we see this again with all the healing, the blind, and all of those different things where he shows mercy. But then one of the biggest ones is sacrificially. Jesus going to the cross and dying for our sins. So Jesus loved us generously, forgivingly, graciously, kindly, mercifully, but the most importantly was sacrificiously. So he's saying, look, love everybody else around you just like I've loved you. And that's through those key characteristics. So imagine, not everybody in the world, just imagine if the body of Christ, believers, the church today, just those people loved everyone around them the same way. Just imagine how different our world would be if everybody genuinely loved those around them, just like Jesus called for us to do here. So looking back, reflecting, thinking on this, how does our relationship with God impact our relationship with others? What does it look like to love others as Jesus loved us? And have you experienced the joy of loving others as Christ loved you? If you're treating people around you with the love that Christ showed you, then you are going to experience joy, no question about it. Looking into the last part of our section here, the last little thing on how we build this good relationship, verses 13 and 14, it says, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I've commanded." All right? I'm thinking about this, and two questions kind of pop up. One, what's the least amount required to pay a bill of love? So, all right, your mother, one, she brought you into this world. She's cared for you your whole life. How do we pay that bill? How do we show our mothers the love that is required because our mothers loved us? We really kind of bring it down to one day, and here's a card and some chocolates, maybe flowers. I don't know. But what is the least amount that we pay? And then the second question is, how much does a person have to pay to expect a good relationship? How can we, what do we have to do to have a good relationship? Now, human nature says that we give minimal effort to achieve a desired result. So just like today, I'm trying to get my kids to help me in the yard and pick up sticks or weed eat or whatever it is, and it's kind of like, I got half the sticks up. Is that okay, Daddy? Is that enough? Well, no. I need you to do a little more. And so, human nature says, "Hey, look, I want to pick up just enough sticks so that Daddy writes me that check where I can get what it is I want." Jesus sets a price that's pretty high right here. He says, sacrifice. That's the key here. That's when you lay down your life for somebody else. That's sacrifice. Cheap, last minute, no thought put into something. Um, that's the type of payment that's going to get us a big zero, big goose egg. But what really brings things home is when we sacrifice ourselves, when we give up something of ours so that we're showing love to people around us. Now, when we have that willingness to give ourselves, that's the true measure of the love we have for others. As Jesus is teaching the disciples here, as he's talking to them and teaching them this, they don't realize that they're going to get to witness this sacrifices of exactly how you lay down your life for another in their own lives. But by going through this, the majority of them are going to experience this, and they're going to give themselves up because of the love they have for Christ. James, Jesus' brother, he's going to be executed. Acts chapter 12 gives us this story. He's going to be executed with a sword because he refused to deny his brother. And then the other disciples, besides John and besides Judas, all of those apostles are going to be martyred for their faith. They were willing to die to express the love they have for Jesus. And not only for Jesus, but they're willing to die to express their love for us, because they're proclaiming exactly what Jesus was that we're supposed to do ourselves as believers. They were doing those things. They were setting the model, and they went to their deaths loving Jesus Christ, loving us by showing their willingness to do this. Throughout the ministry, if we look in Matthew chapter 14, we can see a story where the disciples kind of deserted Jesus, but ultimately we're going to see that they laid down their lives for Jesus. And just as Jesus said right here, there's no higher form of love than laying down your own life. So we know that these men really truly loved the Christ because they were willing to give up their lives to do that. Now, do we love others in this way? Probably not, but we should. We should be giving ourselves for our loved ones around us, not just in those big things, but also in those small moments. We should be pouring ourselves out, sacrificing ourselves so that others can experience the joy. Missionaries are people who've been called by God to go and travel the globe. Some of those missionaries today go to places where it's not okay to be a Christian, but yet they do it willingly. They share their faith. They sometimes die, all because of their love for God. How are some simple ways that we can give ourselves away? How can we be willing to pour ourselves out for a relationship? One, just offering kind words. If you've got a strained relationship with somebody, maybe you haven't talked to in a while, just give them some kind words. A text message takes a minute. A phone call takes a minute, but just give them something nice. Hey, saw where you did this, and that's so great. I'm proud of you. Number two, the second way we can do this, we can share a meal. You hadn't seen somebody in a while. Call them up, say, hey, look, you like to go to lunch? I'll buy you some lunch. And you just sit down and you share a meal, and you talk through that, and that's going to build a relationship. And then also spending time, just going out and doing things with people. That's another way that we can really pour ourselves out, giving our time away so that others may experience joy. Love calls us to pay a price, all right? And the price that we pay for this love is to share it. So all that we have to do to experience God's love is share God's love with the people around us. That's a true reflection of Jesus to the whole world around us. So as we do that, just as you experience the love of Christ, in turn, just give it away to others around you and let them see that through you. So we'll close out with a couple of questions to think about. Number one, why are we tempted to give as little as possible so that we can get what we want? Simple question. When have you experienced the power of sacrificial love? All right. When have you experienced somebody giving up themselves so that you could have the experience of love? And then just list some practical ways that you can demonstrate this love to others. How exactly can I show sacrificial love to the people around us? So thank you for tuning in today. I'm hoping soon that some of these restrictions are lifted and we can all get back together, just hanging out and digging into the Word. But until then, we're going to continue to put these videos out, and I hope you continue to watch them. I hope you continue to grow in your faith, and just remember that we as a church are praying for you, and that we love you, and we want to do everything that we can to show the love of Christ. Thank you.